work that we do so that we can all do it safer and better for the organization.
And so in the HOP context, system is talking about the system of work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Which encompasses everything.
Everything. So from that sort of big overall picture that Marc was just talking about to the very small details of what's actually happening at the time. So an example just happened a couple of weeks ago, working with a group, and they were doing some construction work. And you walk into a room where people are putting in some cabinets, right? So they're using a table saw and actually constructing cabinets going into a high-rise apartment building. And you walk in, and the individual that was using the table saw, as soon as we walked in, because he knew the individual that I was with, grabbed a guard that was supposed to be on the table saw, right, and threw it on top of the table saw as soon as we walked in, right? So you can look at that and say, oh, that's a violation, right?
These guys hate their fingers.
They hate it, right? Right, but instead, with sort of the inquiry and this understanding that people make decisions that make sense to them at the time, right? Local rationale, when you just ask questions differently and you say, hey, can you show me what you're doing? Very quickly, it becomes extremely obvious why that guard wasn't on there. It's because he was taking tiny, tiny pieces that he was trying to cut for a piece of trim. They're 1/4 inch, half centimeter. So it's small. And if you tried to actually do that with the guard on, it would get stuck in the guard. So he showed us multiple times, this guard actually doesn't work well for this application.
So that's the system of work.
That's the system of work, right? So the behavior, right? So yeah, that system of work, his behavior was driven by context, just like all the rest of ours. Out of context, it just seems like, well, somebody's not following a rule. Yeah. Within context, you say, well, of course I would remove the guard as well. And then you ask for the bigger question of, well, how is that information passed to other people, right? So now we've got something that's not working well, a safety system, a piece of hardware that's not working well. What is the context as to who you would talk to? Why would you talk to them? Who you would tell about this problem? Would that be part of
Are you doing
culture?
this just this once,
right?
or is this what you've been doing forever?
All of
and there are many
pieces.
when we look, we always find there are many things out there that have just been done forever. Yeah. And it's our choice and our approach to these things to decide whether we're going to get disclosure and honesty from the people who are facing these things, or in the moment of efficacy to just take the punishment.
So that's
here's why I do this.
That's like a system of work level. So that's kind of like zoomed in a little bit more. But I think it's important that H.O.P, the second word, is organizational. Yeah. So that's the second. Zooming out a bit further, that local system of work exists within a much larger system, which is our whole organization, and all the other kind of factors and pressures and goal conflicts and the stupid policies potentially we have, metrics which drive all manner of undesirable behavior, probably far more undesirable behavior than what we're actually trying to achieve by using metrics. Yeah. The amount of disasters we can see around the world, not even safety disasters, but things like financial disasters and so on, you can go back and look at the metrics and what was being measured and what was being expected of people, and you think, now we can start to see how those organizational factors really affect then the local factors and the decisions people are making every day. So we need the local context, but the big picture context is really, really important too.
And I think it's really important that this isn't about shifting blame up and down the line. So we're not talking about moving blame. It's actually about that everybody in this system or this organisation, right down to your man on the front ground to your CEO, is well intentioned. They're trying to do good work, but it's all dependent. That decision-making process is based upon the information they have available at the time, the biases, and the systems they work within. When I take it right down to a grassroots level, and the work of Don Norman in Norman doors, these are the doors, and I won't draw too much on it, we're all very familiar with Don Norman, but the push-pull doors, you think you're going to push it and actually it's a pull door. You take that then out of that context, and you put it into, say, a construction site, and the way that systems are organised, so perhaps traffic management and the way that people can enter a site and exit a site. The way that we design that system of work will drive behaviour. And so it's important that we're creating those systems to anticipate those behaviours, where those biases may arise. So that's more of at a grassroots level, but as you say, it's right the way through the organisation.
Now I think this what you were talking before, Marc, kind of really struck me, and following off your example with the saw, Andrea, about that idea of the difference between what we imagine happens and what happens in reality. I had dinner with a guy last night who said he had a turning point when he actually first started to go, well, what else is out there? What does this HOP thing look like? What does new view and safety differently? And he described this really clear conversation with a safety person after a very serious incident. The safety person said, he should have been following the effing procedure. Crystal clear turning point for this guy to go, that doesn't make sense in reality. And that's really about this gap between what we imagine happens, which is procedures and systems, management systems and policies and all that sort of stuff, and then what actually happens in the messy reality.
Yes.
Think for a moment about this conversation of metrics here, because we're all subjected to these. I don't know how it is down here. I imagine it's similar to the U.S. I can't buy a pack of gum at a convenience store without being subjected to a survey. But we noticed that you bought some gum today. Did you enjoy your gum? On a scale of 1 to 10, was the operator friendly? Was it, and pay attention to those. And I have a conspiracy theory. When you're on hold someplace and you volunteer to take the survey, I believe it bumps you up in the queue. So I always say yes to the survey. And then out of scientific interest, I always participate in the survey. And here's what you will see without exception on those surveys, is they are not asking you questions about their systems. They're asking you questions about the individual person that you were dealing with. Were they courteous? Did they seem interested in helping you solve your problem? Were they efficient? Were they empathetic? And then we know that when we end up on hold with the customer service representative and we don't get satisfaction, it's seldom because the person on the other end of the line was a jerk. It's usually because they can't get the system to do what they would probably otherwise like to do. Like I don't have a button for give you your money back for the airplane ticket because the airplane never took off. We don't have a button for that. Yes, or the authority. And so those metrics tend not to ask us any questions at all about their system, and that kind of takes us to the bottom. We think people are the most wonderful thing that we have in our systems. In anything we try to do, we need people. They're just resilient and wonderful and creative and fantastic, and they're also horribly unreliable.
So how do the questions that we ask affect the way that we can actually start to embrace principles of H.O.P as an operating philosophy, or start to erode it?
Well, that fourth principle, as we probably need to get to, learning is vital. So questions around learning are far different to questions about appropriating blame.
What do you mean? Can I just tell you? Is that how it works? I'm the boss.
So I think Todd, like one of the real critical shifts he talks about is going from why something happened or why did you do that? It doesn't really get you very far to how did that happen? That completely changes the conversation. So
how did it make sense?
How did it make sense?
How do you do that? Right?
Why is always going to take us to an incentive or a consequence. Like I needed to get it done and I get a bonus, or if I don't get it done, I'm fired. I mean, that's kind of where.
And I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment about the gap between work as imagined and work as done. And unfortunately, some people are taking that to mean an audit. So, well, this is what we imagine, this is what it is, and now we've got a gap, so we need to close it up. But the key...
that assumes that the closing is we need work as done to match the work as imagined. Absolutely. What if we flipped it the other way?
Or actually explored that canyon, in more detail, because, there's a gap. Why is there a gap? And that's where this appreciative inquiry approach of asking better questions, of delving deep, but many of the principles we talk about here about where error is normal, these are the barriers to that learning. So if we can overcome those barriers, we can get deep down into that canyon and understand. So I'm using an analogy here. I'm hoping you like from the Grand Canyon.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I think that's very much learning is the outcome that we're trying to achieve here.